He had this road atlas, with a spiral bound thing, and it was back there. But that was his. It was on the floor back there, and it got soaked. So I got home, and I put it in the microwave.
No.
And I forgot that it had a wire spiral bounder. And I started the microwave, and then I forgot about it. And I went to bed. And I got up in the morning, and it was like, what's that smell? And what had happened was a fire had started inside the microwave. Yeah. The whole back of it had melted, everything. We were that close to the house burning down. Brad stuck metal in the microwave, turned it on, and went to bed.
You slept right through it.
How old was I? 20. Our goal on this podcast is to know Jesus better and by the power of His Spirit do better, so together we can be a little better. Well, welcome to A Little Better. So glad to have you here. And we've been in Unsung Heroes for a few weeks. In fact, we're getting so close.
Week 5.
Week 5 of 6, getting so close. Yep. And so glad to have you here. So glad to have Noah here. So glad to have Tim here, first-time visitor. But we will get to that in a moment, because right now I want to get everyone up to speed. Noah, you brought it home. Week 5, Unsung Heroes. What was your sermon in 60?
Yeah, Brad, it was amazing. I mean, we're in the period of Jesus after all these Old Testament periods. It's like when you're reading your Bible and you finally get to the New Testament in the Bible in a year plan. I'm loving this. My message was on Jairus, and he's a religious leader of the time who ended up coming to Jesus to heal his daughter. And there's kind of 4 traits of faith that we looked at. Faith requires humility and desperation for Jesus. Faith leads us to intentional action, life-changing encounters with Jesus, and faith overlooks fear to do the impossible. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of brought it home with a little practical application of 4 opportunities for Jesus to stretch our faith with trials and seasons of grief, uncertain futures, and calls to obedience. And so talked through those and prayed through some of those as well, which is really cool.
All right, that's great. And that was a lot less than 60, frankly. So we got a little time to just tell us quickly the story, right? There was 2 people in the story. What was their deal?
Yeah, so we've got a woman who was bleeding for 12 years and a 12-year-old daughter. Two daughters, 12 years, both struggles. One started bleeding at the same time the other was born. And one was Jairus' daughter, and the other one ended up being Jesus' daughter. It's phenomenal, this tale of 2 daughters, where Jesus heals the bleeding woman on his way to save Jairus' daughter, and Jairus' daughter actually passes away while he's healing this woman with the bleeding issue. And Jairus is thinking, Lord, you missed your opportunity. The door closed. You're too late to save her. And Jesus was never too late. And he resurrected Jairus' daughter and ended up stretching Jairus' faith to a new place where it wasn't just healing, but resurrection that he was there for.
Well, listen, I'm going to get out of control here because I love this story. There's so much to talk about, but we got to let people know who else is in the room here.
Yeah, we got to introduce Tim.
So introduce Tim. I mean, I'm the host, but dude, this is your friend, your mentor. There are stories to be told. Tell us why Tim is here.
Yeah, so Tim is my mentor, and he was the lead pastor of the church building that we purchased in Brighton. And he was there for 28 years. And just one of the guys with the biggest faith that I know. I don't know anyone with larger faith than Tim and Christine. And as a couple, even. I mean, it's just phenomenal stories of faith, and the building there in Brighton, and God's hand and work and everything. And our time with them has been really precious and sweet. And I thought nobody better to bring on a message that's focused kind of around faith than Tim. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, man. Thanks for inviting me. Great to be here.
Yeah.
So we know a little bit about how Northridge ended up at Brighton. But, Tim, tell us your story. How did you end up in ministry in Rochester at this location in Brighton?
Yeah, so I grew up in Rochester. And after going to Bible school, I always knew we'd end up in Rochester. And so my wife and I planted a church. Started off as a little Bible study, and it grew to a church. And we got tired of renting, and so we started looking for property, and nothing was working out. It's pretty expensive to buy property. And then all of a sudden, unceremoniously, we got kicked out of the building that we had rented for 4 years.
Wow.
So we'd gotten comfortable where we were, and all of a sudden, for political reasons, they didn't want a church there anymore, and it's like, what? So like, God, you have a problem. I remember taking the eviction notice, basically. And we had about a month to get out. And I took it to the Lord and I said, God, you have a problem. It's not my church. This is your church. And I felt really impressed by that Brighton campus, by that property. Felt really drawn to it. In fact, funny story is, growing up here in Rochester, we used to drive by the campus every week on the way to church. And at that time, there were big trees and a big barn in the front of the property. Huh. You could not even see the church building. Of course, the doctor's office wasn't there. So there was just nothing visible there. But every week driving by, I felt this unusual pull to it. And I can remember, like, what is that? What's up there? Because you couldn't see it. And so now, here we're looking for a building, and I felt like God was saying, okay, that's what I want you to have. And I thought, okay, well, we'll just rent it. The building had been for sale. The church had petered out, and so I contact the church, the leaders of the church, and I said, hey, we'd be interested in renting your building. No, we don't want to rent it. Or we want to sell it. I know you want to sell it, but in the meantime, why don't you rent it to us? We'll take care of it. Made perfect sense to me, right? But it's like, no, we just want to sell it. So I go back to the Lord. I'm sitting at my desk, right, and in my basement. And I said, well, Lord, they don't want to rent it to us. And I put my head down, and I hear these words, who said anything about renting? Now, I don't hear from God with that degree of clarity that often in my life, but that time it was like this booming voice on the inside of me, and I just was like, God, you've got to be kidding me. $1.2 million. We're a small, young church. And of course, after that, God wasn't saying anything. He had already given me the marching orders. And so that time we didn't have internet or anything like that. So I did the only thing I could do, and that's part of Noah, what you preached on is taking steps of action. What steps could I take? Well, I certainly couldn't write out a bad check, right? So I had these ministry magazines at that time, and I started going through them looking at ads or banks and places that loan churches money. And let me talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. And I left messages for people, and one guy called me back. And I told him our story, and I really had no clue if we could do this or how this could be possible. But he asked a question. He said, okay, this is where you are, but is there any other income that the church has or that comes with the property? Could you rent out the property? And I said, well, there is a daycare that's renting space from the church. Well, how long have they been there? Oh, X number of years. He said, well, that's perfect. I can use that rental income, since it's already established, to qualify you for a mortgage. Wow, that's awesome. So we went through all that, and we got approved for the mortgage, and we put an offer on the church. At that time, it was, I didn't know it at that time, but it was a pretty ridiculous offer, but it was the best that we could do. But now they are so desperate to sell this property, they accepted our offer, and we had to be in the building that weekend. We had no time. So we presented the offer to them. They accepted our offer, and we moved in right away before we closed.
Just out in the trees there? How do you have the services?
Yeah, well, we were in a building, it was old and it needed a lot of work, but it, structurally had a roof over it.
And that is the same building?
It's the same building, yeah.
That we're in now.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And so we started having services there. They're allowing us to rent it until we close.
Okay.
But then right after we get in there, we realize that the realtor had essentially lied to us, that the daycare that was there had been spooked because the property was for sale. And so they were building their own building, and they were leaving. So now he tells us kind of casually, oh, by the way, the daycare is leaving. It's like, what? That's half of the income we needed to qualify for this mortgage. Wow. And so now we're there, and now we're in trouble because I had to, be honest with the bank and tell them, hey, I'm not going to keep this from them. This has happened, and the bank said, oh, well, gee, that's horrible, but I'm sorry, we can't honor this mortgage. Now, I understood that made perfect sense. You're a CPA, you get that. The numbers just don't work. There's no way that a church our size could do it without that. And so we're in the building now, right? And now the seller of the building is threatening to evict us because, the mortgage isn't going to go. It's like, again, God, you have a problem. This is your church. You told us to do this. And so then what happens is I get the final word, or semifinal turned out, from the bank that, sorry, can't do it, on a Friday afternoon. All right, we go and we have a church service like normal. I didn't tell anybody. We didn't make a big. We just kept, doing the thing. And Monday morning, first thing Monday morning, I get a call from a man I don't know, and he's the president of the bank. And he said, Pastor, he said, I couldn't sleep all weekend. I couldn't stop thinking about you. The man is a Christian. And he said, I don't know how we're going to do this. Now, when he said we, I'm like, okay, this is sounding good. He said, but somehow we're going to figure this thing out. And I'm giving you my word, we're going to honor this mortgage. I said, praise God. So that was the first of a couple of miracles. They honored the mortgage. We closed on it. We bought it. And then the rest really is now it's Northridge, Brighton Campus. And what a thrill to have been part of that story that allowed Noah and Paige and the whole team there just to pick up the pieces where we spent so much time in prayer and so many tears and so much sacrifice to kind of lay the groundwork. And man, we're just so pumped to be a part of this.
Yeah, that is unbelievable. So exciting. And you met over this property, right?
Yeah.
And today you call Tim mentor. Can you tell me why that is and how that relationship has worked?
The first time I think we met, it was in the building, and it was like the day before I preached my first message. It was a Saturday, and he was getting some gear out of like a room or something that he had left to clean up, and I was over there. I think I was vacuuming something, or maybe playing, I don't know, some basketball or doing something, and so we talked for like shortly, maybe like 5-10 minutes, and he said, I'm going to come see you preach tomorrow. And it was the first message I ever preached. Now I was scared out of my shorts. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing up here. Now this guy who's been a pastor for 28 years.
Was that a Mountain Mover message?
Great.
It was Mountain Mover. It was the first ever Mountain Mover message. And
it stirred me.
And Tim came up to me after, and he shook my hand and he said, you're just so encouraging. He always is so encouraging. It's one of his gifts, and his spiritual gifts is encouragement. He just says, you're the exact guy I've been praying for and looking for, and that God wants to lead this and this mission, and this more and better is just going to be really good for that campus. I'm so excited to see what happens there. So if you need anything at all, we've got your back in ministry and in life. And so, Paige and I kept in contact, and we went over for dinner a couple times and hung out, and ended up going up to Lake Placid with them. And they've just invested in us a lot, and we've learned so much from them, and some of our heaviest burdens we've taken to them, and have helped us carry them. And so they've just been a really big blessing in this journey. And learning how to be a pastor is not easy and not quick. So
there's something outside. I think it's appropriate, to mention also another sacrifice that Tim, you made for the kingdom was accepting our offer. I mean, you're telling the story about the bank, kind of stepping out and honoring a mortgage and God coming through in that way. But God really came through for us through you in the offer.
There were
that
other
you
options.
expected. Offer you accepted. Yeah. So thank you.
Gracious.
I mean, there could be other corporations, whatever, other commercial interests at that location today, and you could be a wealthier man. But thank you, for the sacrifice that you've made there. Sacrifice of prayer, sacrifice of faith, sacrifice of time, everything. What an amazing partnership it's been. Now, let's get back to a message.
Yeah.
Which this has not been off topic because the message is on faith, and we've been hearing about how your faith has been grown and tested, through this. Noah launched with Leap of Faith is what he talked about. And I was just kind of curious, Tim, for you, you hear Leap of Faith. What comes to mind for you?
So back in, I won't give a year. I'll just say when I was getting ready to go to Bible school to be a pastor. I didn't have any money, and my parents weren't supportive of that. And they didn't have any money either. But I knew that God had called me to go to Bible school, and at that time it was $7,000 that I needed. And, I'm a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, and that's just, might as well be $1 million at that time. It's like, it's like when you're swimming in deep water, it doesn't matter if it's 10 feet deep or 100 feet deep. Right. Point is, you're in way over your head, right? And I remember just walking home from my friend's house one day and thinking about the scripture where Moses said to God, he's being honest, and he said, Lord, here I am among 600,000 men, which means there are about 1.2 million people, probably 2 million people maybe in total. 600,000 men on foot, and they're in the middle of nowhere. And you say, I will give you meat to eat for a whole month. And Moses is like, okay, all right, God, that's too much. I can't, his brain is going tilt. And he said, Lord, would they have enough if whole flocks and herds were slaughtered for them? In other words, if we just go over this hill and, whoa, there's flocks and thousands, would that be enough? How about the fish in the sea? If we caught all the fish in the sea, would that be enough? And God's answer was just so God. He said, Moses, he said, is the Lord's arm too short? You will now see whether or not what I say will come true for you. Of course, we know the story and how God did it. But at that time, Moses is like, this is too big. And so in my story as a teenager, this $7,000 is like, I can't imagine that much money. Where is that going to come from? And but Lord, your arm is not too short. And I'm about ready to begin my journey, the journey of a lifetime of following Jesus. I mean, not just being a believer, but being totally sold out in my whole life. Just like when you left the CPA firm, right? I mean, talk about a leap of faith, right? I'm giving my whole life, my whole future to God. And it just hit me. If God is not big enough, if that God is not big enough to pay his own bills, then why are you giving your life to him? Yeah. Right? And that really it wasn't a negative thing at all. It just challenged me that, yes, you are worthy of me to trust my entire future to you. And if you're worthy of that, you certainly are capable of paying your own bills, and you certainly are worthy of me trusting you to do it. And God came through in miraculous ways, and people would just come up and give me checks out of the blue. I never asked anybody for a nickel. I never announced it. And people just started giving me money. I remember I didn't have all the money, right? But I had a big chunk of it, maybe 2/3 or something. And I go to school, again, a step of faith. And I go to school, I give them what I've got, and I still have so many days to pay the balance. And I go to my mailbox. In college, they had, I don't know if they still do it, but they had these little boxes, right? That are, this is your mailbox. And so I open it up one day, and there's this big envelope in it. I open it up, and it just has my name on it. No stamp, no return address, nothing. So obviously it came from somewhere on campus. Yeah. I open it up, and it's just this big fat wad of cash. No way. He's like, man, the Bible school drug dealer must have been moved. I don't know where it came from, but it's like God came through supernaturally, and for 4 years, 8 semesters. Wow. God came through because he's so good. He's so faithful. I don't even know what you asked, Brad, but somehow
no, just ask. I think we could just go on, and we should just telling stories of faith. I mean, we started with a sermon, which is these 2 stories of faith, but God keeps doing it, right? That wasn't just then, that's now too. Yes. He's still, and sometimes it's just putting ourselves in a position of
Obedience.
Act first in order to receive that reward. I think that was the language, right? The reward of faith comes when we step out, and you made the move, you did the rest, and God.
And one of the things that I really loved about Noah's message was that it talked about putting putting action to your faith.
Right.
Because for me, one of the challenges that I've had is that faith, it seems to be something you have in your heart, right? And it is. But I deceive myself sometime into thinking that what I believe in my heart is enough. But faith has to find expressions, like you talked about. Faith without works is dead.
Yep.
There has to be something you do. It's not enough just to be convinced in your heart, but there has to be some action that triggers it, and that's what God rewards. So I love the story of the woman there. You mentioned the message was about Jairus, and I thought, well, maybe I missed something, because I was so captivated when you got into the story of the woman with the issue of blood. I was like, that just captured my whole thing.
Right.
But she was somebody that certainly in a hopeless situation.
Yeah.
But she took a step. Her faith found expression in what she said and what she did.
Right.
I think it's
She heard, she came.
She heard.
And she
right,
touched.
Right. And so hearing built her faith in her heart.
Right.
Romans 7:17 says faith comes by hearing. So she heard, that built faith. But that wasn't what got her healed. That wasn't the faith that got her healed. The faith that got her healed was the faith that caused her to get out and do something and actually take action and reach out and touch Jesus' clothes.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
I would like to just hear from a couple of pastors, for people out there listening who are struggling, with their faith, and I think, it even came up in pre-preach, Tim, because you got a chance to be part of that, and then, in Noah's message, but we see these as trials, tragedies, but they're really opportunities. Opportunities that God has for us that are only made real, only realized, if we have faith. And just, what do you say? I mean, you prayed over all our campuses, for a number of needs, but just practically, what would you say? How, if someone says, I don't got faith, how do you grow faith? How do you encourage faith? What word would you give to folks today?
Start small. I mean, it's small as mustard seed, right? It doesn't have to be very big. And our God is a big God. Like, he can take it. I mean, you can yell at him, you can scream at him, you can jump up and down, you can go to him with everything, with no matter how small it is, no matter how big it is. And a lot of people wait, I think, to take their big things to God in faith, but they don't want to take their small things to God in faith. They feel like it's too small. And I don't think there's anything too small to take to God. And I think for me, where faith begins to build is in the small things. And as you start to trust him with bigger and bigger things, you realize he's faithful to provide. And so you can trust him with 1.2 million, but you probably didn't trust him with 1.2 million first. You trusted him with 7,000 first.
That's right.
And so it doesn't start with 1.2 million. It has to start with a heart posture that I can trust you with $5, not that I'm going to, I'm going to start giving when I have more, or I'm going to start trusting you once I make X amount. No. You have to start with what you have that's, it's small today, and then trust him. Or, when you're struggling with a trial or tribulation, and it might be something that you think is small, but you've seen him be faithful in the past to heal and provide in areas of your life. And you can trust him with those big trials and tribulations. That's what I would say. Start small. Don't.
I think also sometimes we get distracted by the concept of faith, and we need to just forget about that for a minute and just come down to the basics of, well, what is faith? Let's just, it's like you can't see the forest for the trees. Where is it? Well, it's all around you. What is faith? Well, faith boils down to two core convictions. One is God is able. He's big enough. Do you believe that? Well, as followers of Jesus, yes. we believe that. You know, I like to look at a scale model of a solar system, and kind of geeky in this way. But I look at the sun, and compared to the sun, you know how tiny the Earth is.
Tiny,
and to think that, you know, all of my problems, all of my dream, everything is on that little planet, and it's like a little marble that God holds in the palm of His hand. You know, is there any problem that any challenge I'm faced with that is too big for that God? So number one, God is big enough, and number two, God is good enough. When we understand how good He is, right? If we can just focus on those two things, that equals faith.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Tim, it's been incredible to have you here. Thank you for blessing us, not just on this podcast, but just in this whole journey. It's just so awesome to be the family of God. You never know who you'll meet, and it's been incredible. Listen, we've got one more week of A Little Better. I got to get busy because
Brad's bringing the message next week.
I'm bringing it home next week, but I'm going in on a high off your message.
Have some faith.
But the most moving part, one of the most moving parts of your message was when the woman became daughter. And my daughter is named Priscilla. And next week we will close Unsung Heroes with the story of Priscilla. So please come back.
Awesome.